Hello there, my name is Jacqueline Medcalf. I wanted to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about why I'm interested in teaching for homeschool connections. So I was homeschooled myself growing up. We did a pretty eclectic but pretty rooted in kind of the classical curriculum style. I grew up on like the Delaire's Book of Greek Myths and things like that. So I really loved growing up with that really strong focus on literature and history. And I really appreciated, especially as I got older, the like freedom and flexibility that homeschooling afforded. I'm planning to homeschool my own kids. I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I'm planning to homeschool them as they grow up. And I'm interested in helping out other families who are, looking to homeschool, but have particular content areas that they would like support in, or just want to take some of the course load off of mom, or whatever the situation might be. So about my academic background, I majored in English at the University of Dallas. It's a small Catholic liberal arts school. And so I really loved kind of being immersed in that liberal arts tradition and the ability to kind of make connections across the curriculum. And it's a very sort of cohesive experience where you're able to kind of pull connections you know, from your, travels during the Rome semester, during different academic areas of study, your own major, the religious life and spiritual life, and all of that kind of comes together. And that's a really special thing, like to be able to, in your upper level English major classes, if a poem or a novel is referencing like a particular like philosopher or a particular historical event, to have that sort of shared body of knowledge that you can draw from, and that really enriches all of your conversations. So I love that experience. I love the friendships I made through that. And I love the sort of desire to educate and foster the whole person. And that's really what I would want to, that's what I would want to offer my own kids in their homeschooling, and that's what I would want to offer potential future students. Um, my kind of primary academic interests are probably history and literature. Um, I'm, I would also be interested in things like, say Bible as well. Um, although I kind of can't help but bring the kind of history and literature angle to that. Archaeology is another kind of interest of mine. Those are things that I kind of pursue in my free time. A little bit about me and my kind of my main background is in literature. So a little bit about the way I approach that is I really believe in, you know, rooting yourself in the text really carefully and paying attention to the details, and what the ways that the author is kind of prompting you to think about things. So looking for what kind of cues you're getting about how to about what's important and how to judge what's going on. I also believe kind of fundamentally, like, part of the purpose of literature is joy and beauty. Like, all of, even things that we really kind of put up on a pedestal as being like the greatest works of art, they're also meant to be entertainment. They're meant to be fun. And I think that any kind of literature class where you kind of lose sight of that and no one's having fun has really lost something crucial. Um, and then, I resist pretty strongly, like, sort of over moralizing where we're reading this text in order to learn a valuable life lesson, or and they're expecting kind of a neat little take home moral or something. Like, I resist that pretty hard, but at the same time I do think that literature lends itself really well to the pursuit of wisdom and the good life. It sort of lets you kind of look through a microscope at people and their inner lives and their choices, and the way that events of a life play out, and can really foster really profound conversations about what was the right or wrong moral action here, or what made for a good life, or didn't make for a good life. um so I think it can sort of seamlessly be integrated with those kind of really rich philosophical and moral conversations without sort of beating it to death with really kind of clunky, clumsy moralizing. It's sort of, it's attempting to give a representation of life, and so it gives you an opportunity to look at life and how to live in a sort of a more organic way. A little bit about my work experience. I've worked in both classroom teaching and in administration. What I'd want to kind of highlight as most relevant is, for the past year, I've been teaching test prep for the Princeton Review. So I teach SAT, and most of that I do some of that in person, and but a lot of that I've been doing remotely. So I have experience kind of trying to teach remotely, and I'm familiar with some of the challenges of that. So in my I don't know exactly what the Homeschool Connections interface would be like, but in my Princeton Review interface, I can use tools like I have sort of a virtual like slideshow PowerPoint, and then I'm able to like annotate on that. We also have some tools like polls or like different kind of like reaction buttons of like thumbs up, thumbs down, and there's also a chat, and there's audio, and trying to use those to kind of interact with the students more like one would in person. Um, it is there are definitely challenges that come with the remote classroom. It's a little harder, I think, to kind of um, get to kind of you can't just sort of glance around the room and necessarily gauge engagement easily like that. You know, and there's definitely more potential for students to be distracted, and that can be a little bit harder, I think, to develop a sense of like community in the classroom that way. Um, you know, but on the other hand, in my sort of free time in my personal life, some things that have been really valuable to me are things like the Catherine Project, which essentially is just literature and philosophy discussions that take place over Zoom. And so I've had wonderful experiences with that, where there, is not just a really excellent, rich, lively discussion, but also just a real sense of fun and camaraderie with that. Um, I'm also familiar with things like, Corey Olson and Mythgard Academy, where he's sort of, he's his background is in academia, but he's also made sort of a career out of offering a ton of really wonderful academic literary conversation for free online, and so that's something that I've really been kind of steeped in, and hopefully have learned some things from. So I definitely believe that sort of rich, very sort of human and interpersonal conversations about literature and academics can take place online. It just takes a little bit of just a little bit of a different tool set than you would use sort of in the ordinary physical classroom space. Um, so a little bit about my interest in homeschool connections. As I've mentioned, I have a real love for, the liberal arts and literature and history and those kinds of topics, and I'm looking to sort of, engage with those at, I'm looking kind of for an outlet to engage with those, and I think that's an area where I have some strengths that I would be interested in offering families who would like some help with those. Um, it's also just sort of for personal enrichment for me as well. Right now, I am kind of tentatively starting some academics with my daughter, but right now it's all sort of, the alphabet and what are the bugs in the yard up to, and that's wonderful. But I would like to get a little bit of, my, other interests in there as well. Um, you know, I'm really interested in the online model, as I've talked about a little bit. I like the idea of being able to potentially pull from a larger possible audience of potentially interested families. So if I think about trying to offer classes in my immediate homeschool community, it's a question of, okay, who would be interested in the first place, who's available at what times, where would we meet, can we go to the library, how does everyone's schedule line up, those kinds of issues, kind of narrow down how many people realistically you could expect to reach it all. And pulling from potentially, meeting online sort of allows you to cast a wider net in terms of people and where they are and their interests and their availability. And so, I'm hopeful of finding people that way. I also, I've got 2 young kids. My husband works full time. We share a car, and so the flexibility and the lack of commute for the online teaching is also really appealing. Um, thank you so much for your time and consideration. And I hope to hear from you before too long. Thank you.